Welcome back, everyone. Mr. Talbott here for you again. We're going to be looking into state building in Africa. It's topic 1.5 from our first unit. And kind of our big objective we're looking at is similar to what we saw in the Americas, how and why states in Africa developed and changed over time. So with that, we're going to kind of need to remember, like sometimes with Africa, we have this kind of mindset that, all it really is, we spend a lot of time studying, the Egyptians when we were in middle school and things, but there's a lot more to it. We're going to see a lot of religious diversity. We're going to see a lot of geographic diversity, obviously from the deserts of the Sahara to the rainforests of West Africa to, some very dry areas in South Central Africa. So it's very, very big and large and diverse continent. So big, in fact, that you could fit all these different things that we see on our map here. So the United States, China, India, most of Europe, Japan, all would fit in Africa. So just give us some perspective. When you're that big, you're going to be kind of have some diversity across it. So what we have is kind of around about 1000 CE, and it happens in different places. Remember, most scholars think that the human species begins in Africa and everyone kind of migrates from there to the other parts of the world. So people have probably been in Africa longer than anywhere else, and so some places did this earlier, some places did it later. But by about 1000 CE, most of Africa is surviving on agriculture. So they're going to be what we call sedentary, staying in the same area. At least, for agriculture, obviously your plants aren't moving with you. And then you're going to develop civilization around that. So you're not going to be that hunter-gatherer nomadic that we would have seen for a long, long time in Africa and civilization and around the world. So when you become more sedentary, your civilization is going to start seeing more advanced things such as literature, such as buildings, and such as government. So this happens around the world, and kind of there's still debate on why exactly what happens, but the big kind of thing that has to happen first is you have to get your population and your population density to a point where farming makes sense. If you're just looking out for a handful of people, just collecting natural resources and hunting, that can work. So you need your population to grow to the point where agriculture will be a productive form of survival. You got to be able to defend your fields. You got to be able to do all sorts of things. But that happens in Africa eventually by about 1000 CE. And so what we see is a very decentralized situation, very much so based on kinship, so your family ties. Kind of, you'd have your smaller tribes. And then those tribes would kind of be in loose confederacies or federations together. But it wasn't like a centralized, like we've seen in other places. They're not going to have emperors, that kind of thing. Wasn't really going on in Africa. So those tribes kind of get together and kind of settle their disputes that way. Your social class, a lot of it is going to be patriarchal in the setup. You're also going to have family is going to be most important, or the clan you're part of. This is similar to the places we see kind of like in Scotland and Ireland. But then also, there's going to be kind of a respect for your elders. And then the older you get, the more jobs you can get, the more respect other people are going to give you. Women, like I said, it's kind of a patriarchy setup. So you're going to see the women are doing things like in agriculture, the collecting of a lot of the foods, certainly helping with the planting and doing a lot of the planting themselves. And doing kind of the domestic chores, the child rearing, the cleaning, the cooking. Men are going to be kind of more in those, what we would kind of think of as skilled labor. So they're going to be kind of the people that are like your leather tanners, and they're still going to be doing some hunting, your builders, that kind of thing. So we can see Africa is going to have kind of some major population centers. Obviously here there is people, but that's kind of the Sahara Desert, not a great place to live. West Africa has a lot of different kingdoms and diversity. Here we'll talk about Mali and Ghana. So they're called the Hausa, which will be right in what is today Nigeria. Then we see also in East Africa, we'll see some areas down here in places like Zimbabwe. Oops. Okay. Now, one of the big things that we need to talk about from a social standpoint is the religion in Africa around about the time period we're studying. So going back, and people think that probably the oldest belief system we kind of call it is animism. And this is you're kind of believing that all things, whether it's living or kind of an inanimate object of sorts, but it could also be, animals, plants, people, things you build. Everything kind of has like a soul or like a spiritual essence to it. So kind of the term comes from kind of in a belief that everything's kind of animated or at least spiritually alive. And like I said, it's probably the world's oldest belief system. That is a religion that still is going on in parts of Africa today, if we look at our map. But then it's going to see Christianity and Islam are going to kind of move in. Starting with Christianity, Ethiopia, kind of up here in what is northern Africa, like northeastern Africa, right near the Horn of Africa. It's kind of an interesting story. So Islam, as you can see, is a huge chunk of northern Africa, and that pushed into Ethiopia as well. Well, Ethiopia had this king, and this king converts to Christianity after he kind of defeats this Muslim force because, partially, maybe the spirit talked to him, or also, I don't want to be the same religious belief of the people I just defeated. So he ends up deciding he wants to get all his people to convert to Christianity. He wants to build a new Jerusalem. So he's going to build all these churches in Ethiopia, still just like entirely out of stone. And as Islam gets even more well established in the area, Ethiopia is going to kind of be cut off from the heart of the Christian churches, which is going to be in like the Roman Catholic Church in Italy, and then also the Eastern Orthodox Church. Ethiopia is pretty isolated, so they kind of developed their own kind of form of Christianity. So that's kind of one of the cool factors there. And that Christianity kind of blend a little bit with some of the animism and other local customs of Ethiopia. Now, we talked already in one of the earlier videos about Dar al-Islam and how Islam kind of spread from the Arabian Peninsula over to South Asia and also spreads into North Africa. And you can see still today, the vast majority of your population in North Africa is Muslim. It spreads first by that trade routes. We're going to talk about some of those trade routes shortly. In some areas, it's going to be resisted. In some areas, it's going to kind of be welcomed, and they're going to blend it with their local customs, similar to what we saw in Ethiopia, and similar with what we see with Islam in places like what is today Pakistan and northern India. So talking about those trade routes, there's kind of two big trade routes of this time period. The Europeans are eventually going to kind of get involved in the trade, but that's going to come further on down the road. So the first big one here is kind of the trans-Saharan trade routes. You can kind of see this mainly involves West Africa, places like Ghana and Mali and the Hausa, and they're kind of connecting to the Middle East. And of course, we know the Middle East is also connected with trade from Europe and trade from places like East Asia and South Asia. Then the other big one is going to be the Indian Ocean Trading Network. Now, what Africa has that kind of goes to both of these places is a lot of gold, it's ivory, and then what they're trading for is kind of going to be metal tools. Salt's a big one. In case you don't know, fun fact, you have to have salt in order to survive. And there's not a lot of naturally occurring salt in these portions of Africa. Certainly not enough to support the population increases that we're seeing during this time. One of the other big exports of Africa is going to be people. So we're going to see slavery is going to be a big part of this. Now, within Africa, it's not like they're just trading with people outside of Africa. They're also going to trade with each other. So we see a lot of connection between these smaller tribes and these smaller kingdoms that kind of sees a lot of the blending of the cultures. One of the big parts of the trade is going to be slavery, and that's going to be one of the big things we talk about in our next video. But that's where we're going to leave it for this one.